Good morning to you all, and welcome to another edition of the Sal Greco Show. And I'm your host, Sal Greco. I hope everyone had a great weekend. I know there was a little bit of chaotic circumstances in New York City. Also, there was a rally in Staten Island that you may have heard of, but it was overshadowed by all the histrionics that occurred in New York City. There's the cover of the New York Post, in fact. War at home. You have one of two individuals that decided to throw an IED device, which, if you don't know, is an improvised explosive device during this rally that took place. And you had an infamous character at this, which is Jake Lang, someone who tried to reach out to me to get on this show not too long ago. And, I don't involve myself in, grandstanders and people that want to do all that kind of stuff and be a agent provocateur, or they think they're an agent provocateur, but we'll get into all of that stuff. Before anything, I'd say hello and a good morning. Lone Silencers in the chat, 92 Charlie, Baby Lou, Frankie Palaguacci, shout out to you. 999 to the Sal Greco Show. It says, support and share the truth at the Sal Greco Show. As always, God bless everyone. And, God bless you, Frankie, because he is always here. Good morning, Fox. Good morning to Hunter NY1. Chronicles the collapse. Is literally chronicling all this nonsense that happens in New York City. And we are going to have our guest on. He's just going to be in a couple of minutes as they, our guest is a sitting city council member. So, they usually have to run around and do things. But before all of that, before even the advertisements, I was going to touch up on something. A lot of these people always say, Sal, you don't cover news out of town, but I did. I've been covering a lot of things and breaking a lot of things right here. We had an incident that we found out that happened in the last couple of days involving a Miami police officer, Remy Martinez. So let's hear what happened.
So just when you thought that the frat houses belonged only to the New York City Police Department, nah, it's not akin just to the NYPD. Over here in Miami, Florida, on Northwest 1st Avenue and 15th Street, police officer Remy Martinez, who worked for the city of Miami police, was on duty, left his vehicle, and went in a room in a home with two prostitutes. And now Internal Affairs is investigating that. But we don't need these kind of people in law enforcement. This is what gives law enforcement a bad name, really bad name. Get this guy out of the profession.
That incident. So just so you understand, I was actually in Miami when I look at this. Miami police chief says embattled officer has been relieved of duty pending criminal investigation. That is criminal, by the way, just so people know. And it's not akin to the New York City Police Department. And, I hear the Joe Cop rhetoric of this always happens all the time. This has been going on forever. Well, then you're the problem, because you explain to the average citizen, to the taxpayer, oh, by the way, the police officers that are supposed to be protecting you and also answering to 911 calls, oh, they're just, committing, frat house activities during work hours while on duty. So they're having sex on duty and you're paying for it. Well, when you call 911 and no one shows up, don't worry, they're having a grand old time. I mean, One Police Plaza has been now nicknamed One Pleasure Plaza. Now you're hearing about things that happen in Miami. And this was, I know exactly the street corner this happened on. This officer abandoned the car. They go to the car. They can't find the guy. Next thing you know, they see him in a building, in a room, leaving with two prostitutes. So what happened is they did a DNA test and it's a match. So he's going to get more than just suspended. For the moment, they're just telling you he's suspended. But there's going to be plenty more on this. And this is disgusting, outrageous behavior. And there's a lot of depravity out there. I understand. But this is the kind of stuff you do not need in law enforcement. And we'll get into a little bit other stuff. Maybe I'll bring it up even with the councilman about some NYPD stuff that they're doing, and it's out in the open there. And, you know, I don't know how you're going to get it, get your house in order there, soccer mom. It's like, but this stuff, I mean, this was another one. And, you know, hey, like I said, I'll cover news wherever it is. It depends where you know, you need tips on the show, you know, so people tip me off of things going on. See, I'm very astute to what's going on in New York City Police Department because I came from there. Also, it's the largest police agency in the world, largest law enforcement agency in the whole world. But there's other law enforcement agencies in your county, whether it be a small one. I mean, last week we covered Jacksonville with their little shenanigans over there. So there's plenty of stuff going on, and we cover it all. It's maybe a 90-minute program, sometimes a little more than that. I can't cover every single thing. But these are things I think that you should know and that you should be made aware of, because you should demand, the highest of the high out of your public servants and public officials. They should not be doing this kind of stuff. Sorry. So with that being said, if you're going to go to now there's a dinner in a couple of days down here in South Florida. It's going to be a Italian-American Civil Rights League dinner. We're having it at Casa Calabria. You go to iacrl.org. You could sign up there. From there, you could then become a member, and then you can join us in Florida, Casa Calabria, 6:30 p.m. on March 11th, which is a couple of days from now, where it's the Florida chapter kickoff. We'll be honoring Roger Stone there. Yes, Roger Stone is half Sicilian. I don't know how many times I got to keep saying, I see in the comments. So he's going to be there. It's going to be a lot of people there. And this is the South Florida kickoff for the Italian-American Civil Rights League. So you join iacrl.org and you can become a member. In fact, the councilman that's going to come on is a member of the IACRL as well. So he was at the original party that we held in New York City like a year or two ago. And also, I don't get my news from the mainstream search engines because they're all biased. So I think you guys should check out Free Spoke. I know you surf the internet and you search for things on a search engine and you don't get what you're looking for. Well, I have a solution for you, and that's Free Spoke. Free Spoke is a search engine that does everything without all the restrictions and all the censorship, and there's no porn ads. Free Spoke is about authenticity rather than agendas. Labels media bias, no intrusions or data leaks. No porn ads, like I said, unlimited, unbiased AI. Also, deep dive podcasting. You can look it up. Go to freespoke.app.link/Greco. Download the app. You could also use the same link to get 35% off the premium subscription, which would be well worth it. Try it out. freespoke.app.link/Greco. You have it, folks. Greco 35, get your 35% subscription off your subscription for Free Spoke, which is what I use. And shout out to Fox. Fox gave us a $2 super sticker. You know, that's a cafecito, by the way. So we'll be having one on you, Fox. Thank you very much. Always in here in the chat. So is Stay Trained Up. I see you in here also. Oh, and if you aren't, please, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, the Sal Greco Show, please give it a like, give it a share, give it a follow. There's all the news I post up there all the time on the Sal Greco YouTube channel. So please, if you can, do that. If you're watching on Rumble right now on the Sal Greco Show channel, please give it a like, give it that Rumble, tap that Rumble button. Also, give us a follow there. You can watch the show there. And, of course, it's on X, streaming live all over the world on the @Sal Greco handle. Give it a like and share it out to all your friends, especially those in the low information bubble. So now we're going to get into this little thing that happened, right? So just to set the table, the NYPD in New York City actually agreed to have a protest settlement agreement. Way back in 2023, it was Police Commissioner Ed Caban, who was partying to the break of dawn with his best friend, Jimmy Rodriguez and company, and he agreed with the mayor, the New York City mayor at the time, none other than the illustrious Eric Adams. They agreed to this protest settlement agreement. So let's go back, and I wanted to make you see this is the actual announcement. And I remember that Mr. Eric Adams made a whole big deal about this, and that the lawyers advised him to do this. So when it was good for Eric, the lawyers advised him what to do. And when it's not good, he tells the lawyers what to do. There was this whole big thing, and the protest responses that happened because of this, you have to follow a four-tier system. Four-tier system. So I don't know if we could get this Eric Adams clip up of him talking about it, because I remember I had this up on X when he was doing it. But here he is, Eric Adams, talking about the actual protest settlement agreement.
Today, we are announcing a legal agreement with the Office of New York Attorney General Letitia James, the New York Civil Liberties Union, the Legal Aid Society, and others stemming from the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. Whether it was with 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, a police reform organization I co-founded, or testifying against the illegal use of stop and frisk, I spent my entire career fighting for police reform and accountability. And this agreement is a step in making the reforms necessary. Today, we are announcing a legal agreement with the Office of New York Attorney General Letitia James, the New York Civil Liberties Union, the Legal Aid Society, and others stemming from the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. Whether it was with 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, a police reform organization I co-founded, or testifying against the illegal use of stop and frisk, I spent my entire career fighting for police reform and accountability.
That's funny.
This agreement is another step in making the reforms necessary to move our city forward.
He's a reformer.
Protest is a fundamental part of American freedom, and this agreement sets new protocols and policies in place for the NYPD during spontaneous protests. It will ensure that we are protecting public safety during these spontaneous demonstrations, while also respecting protesters' First Amendment rights. Balancing these two important rights is one of our administration's core missions. And as mayor, I'm committed to improving our policies to keep New Yorkers safe and protect their civil liberties. Safety and justice go hand in hand. We will never compromise either.
Yeah, he'll never compromise. He knows it all. But let's show the tiers on the screen so people understand how this entire thing works. See, under Tier 1, NYPD will temporarily accommodate peaceful protests passing through the streets of sidewalks. Community affairs officers who you saw out there, even though they were absolutely overwhelmed, you can't have enough of them out there when Jake Lang's in town. Community affairs officers can liaise with protesters, while the NYPD retains the ability to use patrol officers to enforce traffic laws and direct crowds. Kind of saw that. Tier 2 is used when the NYPD believes that illegal activity may be about to occur or that the protest is going back to block critical infrastructure. NYPD can station additional officers, including SRG. They were 3 minutes away. We didn't see them. In the vicinity of the protest in anticipation of the need for law enforcement intervention. Tier 3 takes effect once there is probable cause that an individual has committed a crime. The NYPD will deploy enough officers to address the individuals breaking the law. Specialized units such as SRG, again, they were 3 minutes away, may be deployed as necessary in this tier. And Tier 4 commences when the protest must end. It is activated when either 1, the protesters are trying to enter or blocking entry to sensitive locations, or 2, crimes are so widespread that de-escalation and or targeted enforcement has not worked or cannot work. In this tier, the only viable option is to end the protest before ending the protest. The NYPD must issue dispersal orders to warn the crowd, point out exit points, and identify a location where protests could continue if feasible. And 3-year collaborative committee to evaluate tiered approach, which is what this, they have for this now. Now, you have to understand this protest was not really big. It wasn't really crazy, but we did have two individuals decide to get crazy and do what they did. So here he is. Here's this individual. I don't know his name yet. We're going to show, but this is him lighting this up. You see that? What he just did? He jumps. He goes towards the cop and he jumps the barrier. And they spotted him. But you see what I'm talking about? He got spotted right there. And that's in slow motion. They could see that he's got this improvised explosive device in his hand or something. It looks like it's on fire. He's got something, at least if you can't tell, you would think some kind of smoke bomb from a distance. Later on, you find out what it is. But these police officers are looking right at him. And he's making a run for it. Now, you don't see a large crowd. We're not seeing any of it. So I know that they're quick to try to destroy these cops for not knowing what's going on. You're not prepared. I understand that in all actuality, you could go either way with this argument. That, you should have had a lot more people there. It's Jake Lang. Jake Lang is running around with a goat, by the way. He's got a goat. I know you need a permit for that, but if you do go over to him, it makes the NYPD look weak because it's like you're basically bowing down to this clown. Where he goes, there's been an issue. Wherever Jake Lang goes, there's an issue, whether it's Washington, D.C., whether it's Minnesota, whether it's New York City. So, look at this guy. He's got a goat in a U-Haul. He's running around the city. I understand everyone's got a First Amendment right, but you might have to keep an eye on this clown because wherever he goes, he brings up Antifa, all these other groups. You have radical right-wing people and radical left-wing people when he comes around. So maybe to give a better perspective on this and give his take, we'll have the producer, the co-host, the wingman, Jack Stern, come up to the stage.
Yeah, Frank, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Obviously, as you guys all know, Frank Morano will be with us momentarily. But in terms of the bombing going on, as citizens of New York City, we would be scared to see someone running around and hearing about protests. Yeah, I mean, you have Jake Lang, we just showed the video of him running around with a goat in his car. Does that look like someone that you can just let out on the loose? He's what I would describe as a provocateur, right? He goes and he tries to provoke people. He tries to elicit a reaction. And when people are going to be reacting strongly, you need to have an increased police presence on scene, which wasn't there. And that's really the stem and the root of the concern. There shouldn't have only been 2 police officers to try and apprehend the individual originally once he threw the bomb. That speaks to the gross mismanagement that took place at the protest.
Yeah, well,
especially in the times that we're living in right now, Sal.
Look, I'm the first guy to be very critical of the police department. You could kill them for a lot of things with this, but with this protest, you can't make it look like Jake Lang is the next coming of you need 100 police officers just for him. I understand that, and trust me, we'll never see the real planning of how they plan this out, but there are plans in place for protests. Now, what happened is this could happen at any protest, though. This always, you have to keep your head on a swivel because 2 people decide to act like, I don't know, they're part of a terror network, a domestic terror, whatever you want to call it. But I think, we were going to discuss this rally that occurred that was great on Saturday for our guests, but unfortunately this overshadowed anyone covering that because of what happened with this. So here to give his take and a lot more with everything. He's a good friend of mine. He's actually, we call him the mayor of Staten Island, Time Civil Rights League, and that's city councilman of the 51st District in New York City, my good friend Frank Morano.
Sal, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me on, Jack. I enjoyed your commentary quite a bit as well. And yeah, we certainly live in interesting times. It's certainly a time where being in the city council matters. There's a lot of craziness coming down the pike, and I'm doing what I can to stand in its way.
I know, Frank. I was, we are going to get to your rally, but obviously, and it's a big issue in Staten Island that they want to put a homeless shelter right by a place. There's a shopping center right over there on Arthur Road. There is no transportation in the area. It's basically a trap waiting to happen. Another Mamdani special. But this incident, right, Frank, you saw what happened. You saw the police response. They're killing them all over the place. And you can fault them for a lot of things. I can't tell you, though, I was in this position myself, how you can fault anyone. It's really, to say this, I mean, how do you, I mean, it's just a random two guys. Look at them. These are the two individuals. How are you supposed to stop something like that? Even if you have a billion cops there, how do you, I mean, there he is. He's lighting it as we speak right now.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Sal. One, I think this it speaks volumes about how important the job of a police officer is. You know, you touched upon this. And by the way, this is one of the reasons that I think it's foolish for the mayor to talk about stopping the hiring of 5,000 cops. You know, Commissioner Tisch alluded to the fact that these were all police officers that ran towards danger, not knowing what was going on. They didn't know if it was going to be a dummy device or something real. Turned out to be very real. So I agree with you completely. You know, Nicole Gelinas, who's certainly no fan of the mayor, she gave the mayor a bit of credit in the statement that he put out. You know, one, the fact that he kept Jessica Tisch, in spite of the fact that obviously, you know, his base doesn't want someone like Jessica Tisch. They would have supported a defund the police person. I think that's important. He also took the opportunity to decry violence. So, look, I think the people that should really be ashamed of themselves are the folks like Brad Hoylman-Siegel, the borough president of Manhattan, folks like Brad Lander, the former New York City controller, because those guys already had the story written, right? They had it as white supremacists were attacking someone or trying to be violent or trying to foment violence, and the facts didn't matter. Now, the responsible thing would have been for them to wait and see who was responsible before jumping on Twitter, because that's what every responsible elected official does, right? Jump on Twitter and blame people you don't like. So I think, look, I have a million things that I could fault the mayor for, and he's honestly been a much worse mayor in a much short amount of time than I ever imagined. But I think the handling of this incident is not one.
No.
Yeah, Frank, I very much so appreciated the video that you put out last week when you talked about how, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, right after the snowstorm, you were talking about how you advocate for educating children, but you also prioritize the rationality of saying, hey, when people can't leave their houses, we can't have school in person. We need to have it remotely. You kind of played right into my next point, though, because you mentioned both Brad Lander and Brad Hoylman-Siegel, the two Brads of New York City politics, if you want to call them that. But look at the tweet that Hoylman-Siegel put out where he talked about disturbing acts and displays of hate targeting Muslims and Jewish New Yorkers. And I think this is kind of the stem and the root of the problem that a lot of people have with both of those two guys. They make it about race and religion when in reality it should be about keeping New Yorkers safe. When you look at everyone in that video, Frank, the one thing I noticed is there's a lot of diversity. There's people who are African-American, Hispanic, Black, white. It really doesn't matter, right? So this over-politicization of race and religion feels like it's increasingly present in this administration, especially when a catastrophe like this takes place.
No, I would completely agree. I think, look, I think you have a lot of politicians, particularly in one specific political party, that see race baiting and, you know, playing the race card as their ticket to publicity, political office, and, you know, becoming viral on social media. And it's almost as if the facts be damned. I mean, it's just, you look at how eager these guys were to blame this whole thing on a white supremacist. And, again, a bomb that's launched by a white supremacist is no better than a bomb that's launched by an ISIS-inspired terrorist. But it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. These guys are trying to play to a certain base, and the facts be damned, rational discourse be damned. It's shame on these people.
And I think the FBI put out a statement yesterday, and I believe that 2 individuals, we now know their names. They were walked out today, I believe, from NYPD custody into federal custody. So, and one of them, I believe, lives in a nice area in Pennsylvania. So it's domestic. It is 100% a domestic terror incident that occurred. At least we're not getting the, NYPD, New York City is the safest city in America routine from the soccer mom, which, that's Jessica Tisch. I gave her that wonderful nickname. So they can't hide from this one. But again, I think to try to prevent something like that, I know I saw Chief Edwards out there, and look, Chief Edwards was just in the paper. He got promoted, 2-star chief. It looked like, he reacted. To me, you could say a lot. Now, SRG, remember I tell you, is 3 minutes away, but you can't just bring them in because, like I've been stating on this show, Mamdani's got this whole thing. He doesn't want SRG. He wants them renamed. All kinds of stuff with that. So you weren't going to see them at something like this, and it wasn't a big enough protest to have them there. But, you always see the rhetoric. It's the safest big city. Well, and the reality is, when a guy like Jake Lang is around, and this because, you've been involved with the, Republicans forever. I mean, this guy's a provocateur. If he thinks he's like our friend, he's not even close. I mean, the guy just attracts all kinds of bad people. So I understand the whole point of not having 100 cops out there just for him. But the guy was running around with a goat, Frank. He's running around the city. He's provoked. He's basically wants something to happen to him. And he was out there again this morning at this press conference when the mayor and the police commissioner, the chief of department, and again, he's trying to provoke things. And it's like, this guy is just, to me, he's a bad faith actor, having him there. I mean, here he is this morning. I mean, Frank, I mean, how do the police department, how does a city handle having this guy around who's basically, he wants something to happen. He's provoking it. He's fomenting hatred out here.
Again, I don't follow him too closely, and I take my cues from who the serious actors are in the right of center influencer sphere from guys like you, because you know who the jabronis are from people that really have something to say. Yeah. I don't follow him too closely, but I feel like I've been saying this a lot over the last week as I talk about Sid Rosenberg's tweets and Vicky Palladino's tweets. The guy is entitled to a First Amendment right? So he might say things that are off base. He may say things that are crazy. He may say things that are hateful, but the Constitution protects that, right? He's got just as much right to say that, all that crazy stuff, all that nonsense, as much as somebody that wants to go out and mourn the death of the Ayatollah, right? In both cases, I think what they're saying is vile, but that's what makes the First Amendment so great, is we don't pick and choose. Well, at least we're not supposed to pick and choose. The city council is trying to do that now in the case of Vicky Palladino, but we don't pick and choose what speech we think is okay and which speech we think is not.
Yeah, I don't think that trying to silence Vicky is a good idea. Now, I will say this. I saw what Sid Rosenberg said. You and I both know Sid. I only say this with that. When you have Andrew Cuomo in the, now as one of your employees and you're actually losing ratings, including you no longer being on that network, you'll need to do something in order to get yourself back in the limelight. And I think that's kind of what you saw. And then you saw the comments from the CEO and all of that. So I think it's more of a stage act than any real teeth behind it, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think also Sid may just have a tendency, and this is what makes his radio show great. He just has a tendency to speak, or in this case, tweet from the heart without an editor, right? He just puts it all out there, whatever he's thinking. And look, I don't like what Sid said, but, I've never called anybody, a cockroach, in spite of my worst enemy. But a couple of things. One, he apologized within a couple of days. And I think it would have been nice if some of the people that ran to Twitter to criticize Sid and to say, I don't know how anybody goes on his show, if some of them would have said, I know I've said a lot of stupid things myself, and I think that was very big of Sid to come out and apologize. Nobody said that. Not Schumer, not Tish James, not Mayor de Blasio, not Governor Hochul. Nobody said that. And the other thing is, with the New York Times, the City and State piece, and even TMZ, even the Today Show this morning, they all mentioned Sid in the context of this this ISIS-inspired would-be terrorist outside of Gracie Mansion. Now, the fact of the matter is, Sid had absolutely nothing to do with somebody bringing a bomb outside Gracie Mansion. Forget about the fact that these are people that wouldn't be on Sid's side for anything, but even if they were, he's not responsible for that. A lot of people tried to blame Rush Limbaugh for Timothy McVeigh. A lot of people tried to blame Al Gore for the Unabomber. Neither of those are true. You know who's responsible when somebody is making a bomb? The person that makes the bomb, not somebody on the radio. And I think when media outlets do that, or when politicians do it, it just has all the hallmarks of clickbait. They want to throw Sid's name in there because they know that he's going to talk about them on the radio, and it's going to generate more attention. And it's no way to conduct journalism. It's no way to be an honest broker. The people I really respect are folks like you guys, but even other controversial social media influencers like a Glenn Greenwald, a Megyn Kelly, who they will call out their own side, and they'll be intellectually honest and give their opinion, criticize their own side, and praise the other side if the other side does something worth praising.
Sadly, Frank, that's indicative of the world we live in, though. When anyone says something, we just look for selective evidence that indicates their rhetoric led to deadly actions or violent actions in this case. But, I also think there is merit to some of the comments that people are making in terms of the extreme lengths that Sid and others have gone to. I remember a couple months ago during election season, Errol Lewis even confronted John Katzimatidis about it on New York One, saying, listen, you do have to bring the temperature down a little bit because this is a very kind of turmoil-ridden time. And when you go out there and call someone a terrorist and say that he's a cockroach and all this stuff, I do think it's a little extreme. Frank, in the business that we're in, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to, go to some far-reaching lengths. I've even gone on the air and called Sid Mr. Clean, had a little bit of fun with him. It's nothing crazy, right? But at the end of the day, the way people look at it is he kind of went over a line, and once you cross that line, there's no going back. I'm not saying I agree with
right. I understand that, Jack. And look, when I was on WABC, I was probably the most mild-mannered person in terms of temperament on that station. But I'll just say, I think it's unfair to take someone like Sid or any broadcaster when they're on the air 20 hours a week and sum them up based on what they say in a tweet, right? Ultimately, the nice thing is, if I think a broadcaster goes too far, or they just say something that I don't like, my freedom as a consumer is I can just not listen to it, right? I think the great thing about the internet is we're now in an age where you can listen to whatever it is you want to listen to at any time. If you don't like what Tucker Carlson says about Israel, for instance, don't listen, don't watch. But the idea that the cancel culture police need to police what's appropriate for somebody to say, I think that's for the birds. Now, I think you're right, Jack, in that I don't think people should be shocking just for the sake of being shocking. I don't think we should look to be outrageous just so we get 100 retweets or say, oh, look at that outrageous thing that said. But look, I think ultimately the exciting thing about the climate that we're in now is also the dangerous thing, which is anybody can be a broadcaster. Anybody that's got a smartphone can become a broadcaster. But we, as the consumers, have the ability to listen to whatever we want to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a big TikTok, like a certain individual is now the mayor, you could become mayor of New York City too if you're pretty big on TikTok. It's amazing. But social media is pretty big. Now, I want to get to this whole rally that you did, because this was really what I thought was going to be a huge thing. It ends up that, this other incident kind of took away the headlines from it. But you had this rally, so people understand. Out on Arthur Kill Road, on 4964 Arthur Kill Road, there it is. This spot is where the illustrious mayor of New York City right now, Zohran Mamdani, wants to put a homeless shelter. Just so you see, this is in Staten Island and South Shore. There is no public transportation there. So this would be probably, you're going to start to see a huge uptick in crimes and other stuff. So I would be against this if I was still a resident of Staten Island. I think most of Staten Island, if not the super majority, is against this. You were against this. You had this big rally. So, Frank, why don't you tell us what exactly happened and what's going on with this homeless shelter they want to put on Arthur Kill Road?
Thanks. Look, and I know you have a national audience, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about a Staten Island issue. But what's happening right now, Sal and Jack, is the city has announced plans to put a 160-bed men's homeless shelter at this specific location, 4934 Arthur Kill Road on South Shores, on Staten Island South Shore. And the community only found out about it after the decision had essentially already been made. There was no real consultation with the neighborhood, with the community board, or even with some of the agencies that would normally be involved. This location makes absolutely no sense. It's, as you saw in the MapQuest that you showed, it's a low-density area surrounded by homes and small businesses, very limited mass transit, and very few services nearby. If the goal is to help people get back on their feet, putting a large facility in a place where residents are going to struggle to access jobs and treatment and support services, it doesn't help them, and it doesn't help the community. So what you're seeing now, we did this rally with about 12 hours notice, and we had over 100 people come in less than a day's notice on a Saturday morning, by the way. So what you're seeing now is bipartisan opposition. We held this rally with residents, elected officials from both parties. We've written to the city demanding they reconsider, and we're exploring every legal and legislative avenue to stop it. The bottom line is very simple. Staten Islanders are compassionate people, but dropping a massive facility like this into a neighborhood without transparency or any planning, really, it's just wrong. So we're going to keep fighting it. I was told that the mayor was going to be in Staten Island this morning. I was going to meet him and ask him personally to reconsider and give him a personal letter inviting him to meet with the community about this. But his plans changed because he had this press conference on the bombing, which I understand. So, but rest assured, I will hopefully be able to get the chance one-on-one to make the case to the mayor as to why this is a very, very poor decision.
Yeah, we agree with you that this is a really bad decision for all of the reasons you mentioned, but I think we can also agree, Frank, on the fact that homelessness has been a big issue in New York City for a very long time, because when you take homeless people off the street and you put them in a shelter, the shelters are very dangerous. They either use drugs, get in a fight, they leave the shelter for other reasons. So what do you think would be kind of like a viable long-term solution to this kind of decades-old long problem?
Yeah, such a good question, Jack. Well, first, before we talk about a long-term solution, which, like most things, I think is multifaceted, let's talk about the short-term solutions, which is the mayor. The same day we got word they were putting this shelter in the South Shore of Staten Island, the mayor announced that he was closing a 250-bed shelter at Bellevue, which was near mass transit. It was near a lot of support services. So to be clear, we're not solving anything by putting the shelter up. We're just exporting the homeless problem from Midtown Manhattan to the outer boroughs. I agree with what you said 100%, Jack. Homelessness is as serious an issue in New York City as it gets, and it has been that way for decades. So the long-term solution has to start with recognizing that the shelter system has basically become a very expensive holding pattern, not a pathway out of homelessness. New York City is spending billions of dollars every year, yet the number of people in the system keeps growing. So a real solution has a few parts. First, we need to focus a lot more on mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment, because a significant portion of the chronically homeless population is dealing with those issues, and they need real help, not just a bed for the night. Second, we should be putting shelters near transportation. We should be putting shelters near jobs and services, not 160 men next to a dancing school. So people actually have a chance to stabilize and find work. dropping these large facilities in remote areas without those supports, it doesn't help anyone. Third, we need to expand traditional housing and job placement programs so people move out of shelters faster instead of getting stuck in this system. And finally, and I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but you try and be substantive to a complicated question. Finally, the city needs more transparency and better planning about where these facilities go so communities aren't blindsided. And so the burden is shared fairly. The goal should be simple: help people get back on their feet, not keep them in a permanent shelter system.
That's a good point. I mean, I actually I have a question here from someone in comments from Smay60S on Rumble, of all places. Doesn't the community have a say in this matter? Like, actually, so Frank, I mean, the community was there with you. I would say their voice should matter more than anything else. They don't want this there for the obvious reasons you just stated. So does the community have a say, or is it just the mayor's just going to drop this in the middle and doesn't care about anything else?
Well, we're going to try and make the community have a say, because when the owner of this property, who had migrant shelters all over the city, by the way, and is making millions from them, when the owner of this property who's refused to meet with me, I've asked to meet with him repeatedly over the last year. He's refused to even return any of my letters. And I want to talk to him about the project and how to get the community involved. No interest in talking with me. So this is a big part of the problem. What that user mentions is really the heart of the problem. In most cases, the community doesn't. Well, anyway, let me finish what I was going to say before. But when they filed for this, they said it was a transient hotel. Yet the letter that we got from the Department of Homeless Services on Friday said specifically this is a men's shelter. By the way, the original plans call for 46 rooms, 2 beds each. That's 92 people. The letter we got on Friday says 160 people. So I'm not sure which is correct. But if it's a shelter, that raises a little bit of a different regulatory framework than if it's a hotel. And we're going to exploit that, and we're going to use that to try to slow this problem down. But in most cases, the community doesn't have a meaningful say when it comes to shelters like this, unless a rezoning or a major development that goes through the full public land use process. Homeless shelters are often cited through contracts and administrative decisions by the Department of Homeless Services. By the way, if they followed normal zoning, they couldn't build this. They couldn't build a 4-story hotel. It's only because they get a letter from a city or a state agency, in this case, the Department of Homeless Services, that allows them to have a waiver to essentially violate the local zoning laws. So what happens is the city signs a contract with a nonprofit provider and identifies a building. And by the time the community hears about it, the decision is largely already made. The local community board and elected officials might get noticed, but they don't have the power to approve or to deny it. That's why you're seeing so much frustration. People feel like decisions that dramatically affect their neighborhood are being made without any input from the community itself. And that's something we want to change going forward. If you want to come to us and say, let's have a discussion about how we can find beds for the 200 or so homeless people that might be on Staten Island, let's have that discussion. I'm all for having that discussion. But plopping it where it doesn't belong in a community that has had no input on anything having to do with this project, it's not reasonable. It's ridiculous.
And the ramifications are going to be very wide ranging, from driving down property values to increasing crime. And yeah, I mean, I think this is why many New York City residents are upset with the state of politics in particular, is they feel like they're being neglected. And not only like they're being neglected, but they have no real input into what's going on, whether it's Mamdani floating the idea of a property tax increase, which I understand, Frank, would impact a lot of your constituents, or city council saying they're going to have to cut certain social programs without getting any input about what exactly they're going to be cutting. A lot of residents, especially in your borough, with it being kind of a little bit further away from Manhattan, probably feel like with a proposal like this, they're being neglected and like the city doesn't care about them anymore, especially when you see the homeless shelter at Bellevue kind of get kind of thwarted immediately. It's like, we're just going to move it to Staten Island because not as many people go there. It's not as much of a touristy destination. But in reality, you have a lot of people living in very expensive houses nowadays there, right? So this is very impactful.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I agree with everything you said there, Jack.
Now, I do have one. I mean, Silver Bill says, let's be honest, they're doing that because Staten Island is still a Republican area. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Well, let's talk about that, right? So, I met with the mayor briefly before he took over office, and I said, we're not going to agree on everything, but the areas that we can find agreement on, let's work together on that. And I was sincere, and am sincere. I went to his inauguration as a show of good faith. I might have been the only Republican out there in the freezing cold. And I was maybe the only one cheering when he said, I'm going to be your mayor, even if you're a Republican. And he said, and there was nobody cheering louder than me, that said he wanted to be a mayor for all New Yorkers. Now, that has just quite simply not happened. Okay.
No.
Let's just look at the last 2 weeks. Now, forget about poor decisions like threatening one tax hike in order to get another tax hike. Let's forget about poor decisions like stopping the firing of 5,000 cops. But we had this massive snowstorm a couple of weeks ago, which was entirely predictable. Everybody predicted that Staten Island was going to get hurt. And it was abysmal. The conditions on Staten Island were absolutely abysmal. We were, if not ignored, we were certainly paid short shrift by the city. And then even once it was clear that Staten Island had gotten walloped more than anyone else, it still took 3 days for sanitation and other entities to send additional resources to Staten Island. And when the mayor was asked, well, why are the conditions so bad on Staten Island? He said, oh, it's the hilly terrain. It's the topography. Well,
who's giving him this information?
So that's one. Then he opened schools, as Jack was pointing out, on a day when people couldn't get out of their driveways, and where teachers had nowhere to park and nowhere to get into school. Other boroughs can take a train. We couldn't. Our train was suspended that day as well. Then, again, you give him one mulligan. Then he comes out with this 2K pilot program. Childcare is important to me. Sal knows we have a 4-year-old. I understand how expensive childcare can be. And yet Staten Island is the only borough excluded, only one that's excluded. And then within days, he says, okay, we may forget you for plowing streets. We may forget you for closing schools. We may forget you for 2K seats. But the thing we're going to keep you in mind for, we're going to plop a 160-bed men's shelter into a community that doesn't want it, with no community input. So it seems like this is a deliberate effort to screw Staten Island, right? I mean, it seems like for all of the things that Staten Islanders may want, services, attention, preschool seats, that we get forgotten about. But when it comes to the stuff that no one wants, or at least most communities in the outer boroughs don't want, that they somehow remember us for. This is crazy. This is crazy. So I don't know if it's because we're Republican or because we're different. We're a borough that has drivers and 1- and 2-family homeowners and things of that nature. But it definitely seems as if Staten Island has a target on its back. Now, I was very sincere in reaching out to the mayor over the weekend. I texted him and I said, look, Mayor, I'd like to meet with you privately to see how we could get your administration's relationship back with Staten Island back on track, because right now it's sideways 6 ways from Sunday. And the mayor said he's willing to take that meeting and wants to have that discussion. Let's see where that discussion goes.
And he died on the hill of saying that he was going to help Staten Islanders, Frank. I mean, remember in many of his campaign videos where he was going around and knocking on doors, he was meeting with people from the North Shore. He was meeting with families who were reliant heavily on bus service, saying that he was going to expand that. Then when he gets in office, there's a bait and switch where the first thing that he does is he kind of negatively impacts the community on a number of different fronts. So,
yeah, look, I hope things turn around. There's no, we've seen a lot of mayors that may make some mistakes early on in their term, and then they're able to turn things around. Look, I don't expect him to become Rudy Giuliani anytime soon. No. I recognize he has a certain ideology, and people voted for that, right? But you can't give you can't give short shrift to the same community over and over again, and at the same time say that you want to be a mayor for all New Yorkers, because as of now, you're not.
I want to ask you another thing, Frank, is I think you want to put legislation forward for like a neighborhood watch Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know there's this discussion out there about that.
Yeah. Well, look, I had this in the pipeline already, but the fact that the mayor wants to stop the plans to hire 5,000 new cops, and a lot more cops are going to be eligible for retirement in the next year or two, makes this even more urgent. I'm actually going to be introducing this tomorrow. And basically, it's very simple, is it provides a pilot program for civic groups or even just groups of neighbors to set up a neighborhood watch, get certain training from the NYPD, and get grants, about $15,000 or so for things like equipment or things of that nature. So basically, we want to make it easier for neighbors that want to do this. We're not bringing a neighborhood watch to any entity that doesn't want one. We're not creating armies of vigilantes. We want to increase the coordination that concerned citizens have with the police. Simple as that. So I'm going to be introducing that tomorrow.
All right. You're not afraid, like, I guess one of the detracting voices out there would say, the violence interrupter plan and all that. Like, this is kind of what, I think Eric Adams tried to implement that, and it's community people acting kind of like this, and then they end up committing crimes themselves or convicted criminals. So this isn't going to be like that.
I certainly hope not, right? That's one of the reasons why it's a pilot program, right? We're going to try it for 2 years, see how it works out. And that's one of the reasons that it's designed to be done in concert with the NYPD and the local community affairs officer. We want to complement and support the efforts of the NYPD, not do anything to hinder the efforts of the NYPD.
Yeah.
Frank, over the past couple of years, how have you kind of seen a little bit of a paradigm shift in partisan affiliation in your district? Because in the 2024 presidential election, as you guys can see on your screen here, very heavily red with the exception of the North Shore. But when then you fast forward to the most recent mayoral election, it strayed heavily Andrew Cuomo, with Zoran Mamdani, not Curtis Sliwa, actually finishing in second place. So it would appear that there's a little bit of a blue wave moving into Staten Island. Is that something that you've noticed?
No, I think actually just the opposite. I think Staten Island is more Republican leaning as a borough and redder now than it's been at almost any other point in my lifetime. The numbers in the mayor's race, I think, are somewhat of an aberration, because remember, Cuomo wasn't running as a Democrat. He was running very much as an independent. And I think the lion's share of the votes that you just showed for Cuomo were voters that were terrified of a socialist getting elected. I think a lot of those Cuomo votes were Republicans that had to hold their nose and vote for Cuomo, in part because that's what President Trump said to do, and in part because other conservative market makers, folks like Ina Vernikov, Sid Rosenberg, Joe Borelli, even, certainly no fan of Andrew Cuomo, that they were saying to do. So I think, in my view, that's one of the reasons I think ranked choice voting is a positive, because I think if people could have ranked their choices, they would have ranked Curtis first and Cuomo second, or vice versa. But I think if you compare, I think the mayor's race last year is an aberration because of Mamdani and because he was such a polarizing figure, and you saw unlikely coalitions emerge to both support him and oppose him. I think if you want to make an apples to apples comparison, let's look at the 2024 election and 2004. Let's look at the 2021 mayor's race and 2013. I just think I think the numbers are in the mayor's race aren't necessarily indicative of partisan affiliation. And look, the numbers reflect that. If you look at the number of new people registering Republican on Staten Island compared to the number of new people registering Democrat, there's still more registered Democrats, but in terms of new registration, it skews much more heavily towards the Republicans.
Yeah, I got something for you too. Over the weekend, well, actually, last couple of weeks, I've been sending you some stuff that underneath this soccer mom, Jessica Tisch, she's the head of the police department, but they're having a huge disconnect. I mean, their chief of department, we call him Hansy. You have the chief internal affairs, he's fraternizing. Now you have another scandal, and that your district in the Bronx in the 4-6 precinct. There were cops there. The cops that were assigned, now you would know, cops that were assigned to be guarding Julie Menon, who's the Speaker of City Council. They're having a frat house. It's an open frat house everywhere. And now the 46th precinct, the former commanding officer where all of this was going on over the weekend, he just got sued because he was doing the same, if not worse. Is there any way, like this, is there any way when you get up there with the committee assignments you have and you get to question the police department, and if you get a chance to question her, say, what are you doing about this? This is all taxpayer, as you know, when a subordinate, if you're a supervisor and you're having extracurricular activities with a subordinate, the taxpayers are on the hook and the police department, because you're a supervisor, you can't do that. And all the police officers that are doing the same, one cop and a cop in the same precinct, they're just following the lead of a supervisor. Do you think there's any way you could bring this up or try to corral the soccer mom and say, look, you're the police commissioner, buck stops with you. What the hell's going on, and why does the taxpayers have to be held accountable for things that you could easily corral that you haven't?
A couple of things, Sal. One, I think I may have a higher regard for Commissioner Tish's ability to lead the department than I think you do. And I think, honestly, under the current mayor, it could be much, much worse. Second, all of those incidents that you mentioned are a little bit different, and we could talk about each one. Third, I'm a little reluctant. You have the whole city that is wanting to beat up on the cops as soon as there's any sign of anything approaching misconduct. So I'm a little reluctant to jump on the bandwagon of the people that are beating up the cops as soon as they are caught jaywalking or parking 4 feet too close to a driveway. But I will say, I think all the incidents that you just mentioned, and the fact that the police officers on the speaker's detail were reassigned, and the precinct commander in the Bronx, and the other incident, the fact that they've all been dealt with swiftly, and we could think of another dozen other recent incidents, I think that goes to show that between all of the layers of oversight at the NYPD, Inspector General, Internal Affairs, 5 DAs, U.S. Attorney, CCRB, I think it kind of is proof that we don't necessarily need more policing of the police. And yet right now, there is a concerted effort among my colleagues in the city council to give the CCRB more teeth to go after cops. They want a CCRB that can make binding choices over things like disciplinary matters. They want a CCRB that has instant access to a police officer's body camera. The fact that any incidents of police misconduct, whether they be serious or a little less serious, the fact that we find out about them so quickly and they're dealt with so quickly tells me the last thing we need is more aggressive oversight of the police department.
I was saying a thing,
but I'm happy to ask Commissioner Tish the question next time she appears before my committee for a hearing.
Just think this, Frank. The chief of internal affairs is fraternizing with his driver, the detective. It's well known, it's well documented. The problem is he's the chief of internal affairs. The chief of department, who, by the way, at this weekend was not around when a major incident happened, and I understand the chief of patrol was also not there. I don't know what they were doing, but they weren't around. I understand they have, underlings and stuff, but the chief of department also, his nickname Handsy, got very handsy with subordinates at a nightclub. It was called the DL, and she was also there. See, it's one thing to address police misconduct on the bottom levels. Here it is, it's from the top, and this is what's affecting the morale in the police department. They're seeing that certain people could go and do almost anything versus a police officer that if he comes in and his shoes aren't shined, he might get transferred, or he shows up 5 minutes late to work. This is what's happened. And now the chief of internal affairs is involved in misconduct. Remember, he is the number one person. Oh, and his executive in the same office is involved with a police assistant aide. That's a civilian. Extracurricular activities on which, again, on duty's misconduct. She should be addressing this, and she's ignoring this, going after small fish. Oh, he came in 5 minutes late, or I don't know you. And that seems to be the disconnect between the police department and her. See, that's the question. No one, remember, these lawsuits like this commanding officer, which could have been avoided. She's the police commissioner. He was under investigation from the Bronx District Attorney. Again, it's not you. He's not now. Bronx District Attorney. They actually reward him. This cop kept going to them saying, listen, all these things are happening to me personally. They did nothing. And he actually gets promoted. Not even under investigation, nothing. It's like it never happened. Yet we see the frat house that's going on. I think these are the things. Nobody brings it out. You don't hear it in the committee hearings, but then in the end, who pays? The taxpayers. And then everyone's up in arms going, why am I paying for this when she could have dealt with it or the police commissioner could have dealt with it? That's basically what we're trying to get at.
I get it.
And also, we're like scapegoating the lowest level people, the lowest hanging fruits on the tree, so we can allow the executives to do whatever they want. And I think that's really the thing that people, private citizens like us, Frank, take the most objection with. You see the FBI raiding Jeffrey Madry's house after he had been involved in multiple departmental scandals.
Mm-hmm.
You see Michael LaPetri having allegations against him just a few months after he took over as the chief of department. Yet anytime a cop shows up late to a detail, they're like ridiculed and suspended for 3 weeks because the department needs to show that they're doing something. And this is an issue across law enforcement agencies, by the way. I don't want to seem like I'm sitting here picking on the NYPD, because just 2 weeks ago, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office had an incident where an underling was caught in an affair with a subordinate. And although there is some form of justice there, they're arresting the individual who stole $14,000 worth of overtime, and they're allowing the chief who was involved in a relationship with him to retire. So this is really an issue across law enforcement agencies, and it seems like it's a lot more prevalent in the NYPD given the scrutiny that they've faced, especially recently, as kind of like the epicenter of a lot of protests.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Absolutely.
I got like, I guess 2 more things before I let you go, because I know you're busy. I'm going to make you put on the regular hat. You're Frank Morano. You're back in the seat. You're on the radio, Frank.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on this whole Iran conflict and how this all went down? Because you sound like just like me. You're a libertarian, technically, like me, like Roger. So what is your whole take on this entire thing that now it's economically, we're seeing gas prices, all this stuff rise, all kinds of stuff. I want to hear your take, Frank. What do you think?
So, look, I'm reluctant to criticize the president on such an important decision of foreign policy because honestly, I love the guy. I'm also reluctant to do it while there are American troops in harm's way. That being said, I think this was a very poor decision. I really think, look, so much of what attracted me to Trump in the first place, and honestly, that's what made me a Republican, is I was always an independent. And Trump's stated goals on 3 things: the border, trade, and non-intervention in foreign wars. That's what attracted me to him and really made me a Republican. This is the total opposite of that. Putting aside the constitutional aspect of this, which I think is significant, but I'm not a constitutional scholar, and people are quick to point out, well, every other president's done the same thing. I think from a national security standpoint, this is very unwise. Iran is not Iraq, right? Iran is a much larger country in terms of landmass. It's a much larger country in terms of population. So what are we doing, right? If you try to explain to a child, and I spoke to a student assembly this morning, why did we invade Iran? What would you tell them? Because the explanation kept shifting. First, it was we have to keep them from developing a nuclear weapon. Well, wait a minute. I thought that's what we did 6 to 8 months ago when the president and Benjamin Netanyahu both said that their nuclear stockpiles were obliterated. I didn't know obliterated means they could just come back in 6 to 8 months. Then the explanation shifted to we have to help the protesters. Then the explanation shifted to we want to change the government. Well, the person so far that they've installed as the supreme leader is the son of Khamenei, who's just as radical as he was. I think this is really a mistake. And if you look at the whole last 80 years of history between the United States and Iran, you could see why it's going to be difficult to win the hearts and minds of 80 million Iranians. And where we don't need to go through the whole list, but it's fomenting a coup that installed a dictator, the Shah, whose son very generously said he's willing to take over the transition of Iran. Hasn't been to the country in 50 years, but he's willing to take over the country. Very generous of Mr. Pahlavi. Then you have the fact that you have the sanctions. Then you have the fact that which is crushing, really, in terms of poverty to these folks. Then you have in the 80s, we actually shot down the American military shot down by accident an Iranian civilian airliner. And we paid them off, but refused to apologize for that. Now, then you have in 1983 that we sided with Saddam Hussein and Iraq in the Iran-Iraq war. And you can understand why a lot of Iranians view the United States as such a villain. So my concern is this is going to lead to more American servicemen that are either injured or killed. This is going to lead to more Israeli deaths in terms of retaliation, and even deaths in Middle Eastern allies like Bahrain and elsewhere. I don't like intervening in other countries. I think really for the United States military to get involved, the security of the United States really has to be imminent. And I don't believe that was the case here. So I love the president. I'm happy that he won, certainly overjoyed. I would vote for him again. But I think this was the wrong decision.
And what are your thoughts kind of in terms of what's going on with the MAGA movement right now? Because we've seen a lot of divide for the first time since Trump's been in office in either of his terms, because Trump's always had a very, very loyal base. But when you see Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie and Tucker Carlson kind of speaking out against him, and then you hear some of the things that Trump is saying, rhetorically speaking, which go back against what he promised. He promised to release the Epstein files. He promised no more wars in the Middle East. He promised a good economy. He's not made good on any of those things, even though he's been in office for a year. I mean, it's easy to understand why there's a lot of frustration. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, sure. Right. First of all, I still think the economy is still pretty good. I think there are some warning signs, like the job numbers that came out the other day. And I think there is a very real danger that what we're seeing in AI could be an AI bubble, just like the housing bubble, just like the .com bubble. And we don't know if and when that's going to burst. But I think a lot of President Trump's foreign policy successes, and I think there are many, have been due to his creative use of tariffs and other points of leverage. Thomas Massie is a little bit different than everybody else you mentioned, because he's a libertarian. I never really would have considered him a dyed-in-the-wool Trumper. Tucker Carlson is a very different situation. Tucker, I think you would consider a card-carrying member of the MAGA movement. And I give him credit for being intellectually honest. I know, and I'm not endorsing everything that he said, because honestly, now that he does these 3-4 hour podcasts, I don't have time to pay attention to everything that he's saying. And I'm sure he's saying a bunch of wacky things, like blaming Chabad for the invasion of Iran. I certainly don't subscribe to that. But look, I think part of the danger is when you have people that are these dynamic personalities, whether on the right, like a Ronald Reagan or a Donald Trump, or on the left, like a Barack Obama or a Zoran Mamdani, there's such a temptation to think that we can't question them, that they're never wrong. But the fact is, President Trump has changed his position on many issues over the years, cryptocurrency for one. And so I don't think that people are any less of Trump supporters for questioning his decision on one thing or another. So I think the MAGA movement is alive and well. I think it's a movement that's going to outlive Trump. And again, not to go to the beginning of our conversation about Islam, but when Muhammad died, there was a big debate about who should be the successor to Islam. I'm sure after President Trump leaves office, you'll see a similar battle for what the future of the MAGA movement is, because there are so many different aspects of it, right? The MAGA movement on border enforcement, on immigration, it attracts some different people than the MAGA movement on non-interventionist foreign policy, right? The MAGA movement on things like the Better Beautiful Bill and tax cuts attracts different people than the MAGA movement on, on tariffs, for instance. So I think the MAGA movement is about awakening a working class movement in in America, quite frankly, that felt totally disregarded by the establishment, by globalism, and Trump winning. This is one of the reasons why I think so many people are so loath to differ from him on anything. When Trump won, it felt for a lot of us like we finally won one. Like
Well said.
It just feels like election after election, Democrat wins, Republican wins, they win. The establishment wins, the globalist wins. Whatever president wins, they still bow to the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. Whatever president wins, they're still picking whoever the last head of Goldman Sachs was to run the economy. But when Trump won, it felt like, okay, here's one for us. Here's one for the working class regular guys. And obviously it's the irony of all ironies that the guy that did the best job of speaking for blue collar concerns was a billionaire himself, but he certainly understood the needs of blue collar folks. So I don't see, I think the differences of opinion can be a healthy thing, but I don't see the MAGA movement going away.
Yeah, we need to agree to disagree. I think too many people, anytime someone disagrees with President Trump, they start jumping on you on social media and saying you're a fake Trump supporter.
Oh, I get it. I get it all the time for things.
Yeah, it's kind of reached ridiculous levels. I think that's what I'm speaking to.
Well, on your way out the door, Frank, I just wanted to let people know how's it like being a councilman. Remember, last time you were on, you were running. You ran a gauntlet. You had to win 3 separate elections. You won all 3. Now you're in that position. You get to see my friends at Filancino now more often. So, what's it like being the councilman now, full time for 3 elections, 1?
Honestly, it's terrific. I was asked this question at PS 55 at their assembly this morning. It's great. It's I get to meet a ton of people every single day that I would never dream of meeting. I get to learn about all sorts of issues that I would never think to research on my own. But it's very challenging. You know, when you're on the radio, you know, you have your 4-hour show, you prep for the show, you do post-show stuff. But ultimately, you know, after the show's over. You go on, you go to sleep, you go on with your day. When you're a councilman, there's just so much on your plate, at least if you do the job, I think, well, that you could work 24 hours a day and still not get everything done that you want to get done. So there's an unlimited number of problems. Let's say this homeless shelter issue goes away tomorrow. There's still a dozen other developments that in my district that they're up in arms about. Let's say all those get solved tomorrow. You still have this huge battle over property taxes. Let's say that gets solved. You still have this battle over the hiring of 5,000 new police. So there's no shortage of battles to fight. But I think New York's in a place now, not just because of Mamdani, but because of the political climate and the timing that we're in general, where being in the city council really matters. It's a very consequential time. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm thrilled that people elected me. And, you know, I'm going to work as hard as I can over the next 4 years. That's
great, Frank. I really, you know, I'm always rooting for you. You know, I'm your friend. You know, I know you outside of this stuff. And, you know, I hope you can handle this. You know, Staten Island is, I mean, you got a mayor that you're going head to head with. I know you saw him. Hopefully you guys could meet up and deal with this homeless shelter situation. That'd be terrible over there. I mean, right next to Patricia's of both things. And yeah, I think you're doing a great job. You know, Staten Island is his own animal, as you know. It's the forgotten borough. You know, so representing it is always a little harder because you don't have as much say as all those Manhattanites, we'll call them, and Brooklyn people, and the Bronx and Queens. So I think you're doing great, Frank. I don't know if you have any last things you want to tell the audience before
thank you, Sal. I appreciate that a great deal. I'm actually going to jump off and do another radio show before I head to my committee hearing in a moment. But I think at the risk of sounding patronizing, that voices like yours right now are so important and need to be heard. There's so few voices in media. Yours, John McCary stands out as well, a couple others, that actually not only have something to say, but have the experience and the wisdom behind their words. It's easy for a lot of us that spent the bulk of our careers behind a microphone to pontificate and say, this should be done, that should be done. But you actually having worn the uniform of the NYPD gives you a very different perspective. And what you and Jack are doing and actually being willing to be independent and call out some of the decisions made on your own side, that's something that's become all too rare. You know, you listen to talk radio, and so much of talk radio becomes an echo chamber for one side or another. And aside from being uninteresting and boring, it really doesn't do anything to move the ball forward for civil discourse. So I think you guys are doing a great job. I appreciate you having me on. I hope you'll have me back.
I will, Frank. Always say my regards to the family, of course, little Carmine, and of course, Frank. I hope this is the year for the Mets. We'll see.
Oh, no way. No way. They're not beating the Dodgers in the playoffs.
Carmine's still waiting for his Sal Greco did nothing wrong t-shirt. Thank you, guys.
Frank, thanks so much, man. Have a great one, dog.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Later.
Yeah, Frank, if you don't know, I used to go in front. I mean, you know, he was still working at WABC. Everything that happened to me, I'd be in front of his house. We'd be smoking cigars together. And we're like, man, the Mets. That was when the Mets, that was 2021. 2022, 2023 is, you know, and now
we made the World Series back in 2016 or 2015 rather against the Royals too. That was a fun year.
Me and Frank are diehard Met fans. It's like it's very hard to be a Met fan in New York City. Just in general, be a Met fan in general. Even in South Florida, it's just hard to be a Met fan. It's just, what can I say? But hey, Frank, you know, we asked him a lot of things there. You got a couple of tough questions. You know, you heard him answer it. You know, at the next committee hearing, I'll be watching to hear if we hear anything from the soccer mom in regards to what's going on underneath her. We're all over it. Like I said, this latest thing, who did you not see? Chief of Patrol Rivera, Chief of Department Hansi LaPetri, who I understand doesn't even show up to work anymore. He's actually regressed in 2026. So, you know, it's taking a lot of time off. I mean, if you don't want to do the job, say what you want about the last Chief of Department, which I'll be saying plenty of in a courtroom.
Last two, really.
The last one in particular, as drunk as this guy could be and as lost and all over the place as he'd be, he was there when something happened. You would see his face. You would definitely hear him, you know, talking. As a Chief of Department, that was one of the most important things. You have to be there, and you have to be in front of the camera, and you have to let people know what's going on. This guy's nowhere to be found on a lot of these incidents. And starting in this year, he's been MIA to begin with. So these are some of the detracting things. And, you know, if you don't want to do the job, then, you know, maybe you can hang it up and let someone else be the Chief of Department, someone who's more worthy of doing, you know, wants to do it. You know, that's the best way for me to describe it. But that's the word I'm hearing is this guy's never at work. So he was there this morning, though.
When's the last time, and I'm going to ask this question kind of rhetorically, kind of because I want a good answer. When's the last time the NYPD has actually had a very competent, good chief of department? The reason I ask that question rhetorically is I think the answer is actually never, because they haven't had a very good one recently. When you look at all of them, some of them were decent as police officers and had good public reputations in executive level positions. But the minute they got into the chief of department office, all of that changed. And I'm talking about Terry Monahan. I'm talking about James O'Neill. I'm definitely talking about Jeffrey Maddrey, because, you know, he had nice little bits and spurts with community affairs and kind of outreach base units, but once he was in administrative oversight, it was a disaster, right? So it's kind of like a last step before you retire for people who have had what seems like a very cushy executive level career for about a decade or so.
Yeah, I mean, on the Maddrey, there was a lot of things. It's just unfortunate. You know, I think maybe Chief Esposito might be the last real chief.
Yeah.
That was it.
92 Charlie mentions him.
You could say anything you want about the guy. He was there. You saw him. You heard him. He made decisions. He was there. I mean, this guy is not around. I don't know what's going on. There's a lot going on underneath there. And like I said, you know, you'll always hear the people say, "Oh, the soccer mom's doing great." I'm just telling you, that is not the case. And from the inside out, talking from people inside this police department, they have a lot of questions about what's going on. So, you know, and it's unfortunate. And you saw some of those things play out over the weekend. But again, you can't. I can't sit there and completely fault the police department for everything that happened, because again, you can't show Jake Lang is the entire police department now has to be, you know, completely reconfigure itself for Jake Lang's arrival. I mean, no, but. Yeah, SRG, you saw the 4-tier response. They were 3 minutes away. Obviously, there's a 2-star chief on the scene, Edwards. The 3-star that was working at that day on that time was Galata. He was the chief of transit, he's a 3-star chief. And in order to call SRG, you need to go through the ranks. And I don't know who was calling the shots, but their plan was pretty simple. Obviously, I don't know everybody, you saw they were looking at this guy. Again, you have to thread that needle, First Amendment right. What's he doing? Is he lighting a cigarette? He ends up lighting an IED. Did they see it? I mean, you have to ask these cops yourself. But they arrested the 2 guys, right? Luckily, nothing. It could have been far worse. I mean, they found a vehicle. They're still talking about that vehicle they found. I don't know if that vehicle is attached to these 2, but all happened. All being said, it's pretty good that nothing major. There was no catastrophic event that occurred. It was just somebody tried something. Luckily, nothing went wrong. Like, we didn't go off. They were arrested. Yeah, I don't think any police officers were hurt, and that's the best that they could do. Of course, again, maybe in the future, the whole SRG thing. I mean, I don't know who's the one saying it can't be there or not be there. It's got to be a large enough gathering. So, all being said, I think, thankfully, thanks to God, that wasn't what it could have been. That's the best way to say.
Yeah, that was obviously a doomsday scenario, Sal, with the individual who lit the bomb and threw it up into the air, hit the ground, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, anytime there is an influential social media personality telling you they are going to be doing a riot or, showing up at an event or whatever it may be, they're not going to say they're having a riot. But yeah, they're going to say, I'm going to cause some commotion. I'm going to have a civil protest, whatever. You need to show up in case there's a worst case scenario. And this was eerily similar to a certain degree to what happened with Kai Cenat back in 2023. Remember when he said he was going to be giving away PlayStation 5s? Not as aggressive or as hostile is Jake Lang. But the point here is it got pretty out of hand, pretty chaotic. This is people who were standing on the Union Square subway marker. So, yeah, I mean, anytime people are going to be showing up and converging, congregating in one place, especially New Yorkers who like to get, let's face it, a little rowdy and out of control, you need to have plenty of cops on scene. And this goes for police departments in cities all across the country, given the civil unrest right now. It's just a very hostile, aggressive time, even if someone's showing up to congregate in a spot for a positive manner, as Cenat was back in 2023.
Yeah, I guess Joel Ramirez says in the chat, one officer was assaulted, was punched by the perpetrator, apprehended. So I guess one officer was punched by the guy. But you could have had no arms and limbs. The device could have actually exploded. So, I mean, I think one, I don't know if it was the chief or someone, a sergeant, kicked the device thinking that it
was Aaron Edwards, the assistant chief.
So that thing could have
fallen off. He kind of kicked it inadvertently, like he was trying to hop over the fence and he just did it instinctively. And that's where I do have some sympathy for police officers, because although everyone on television is criticizing him for kicking the bomb, I mean, you're making these decisions so impulsively that I don't even think you have the time to think. You see a bomb, you see it not go off right away, and then you just try and kick it out of the way. Now, could have it had exploded when he kicked it? Of course it could have. I think that's the most likely outcome, just watching it in real time. But thankfully it didn't. Thankfully it ended up being a deke and everything was okay. But it's hard to sit here and Monday morning quarterback saying the next time something like that happens, this is how we're going to handle it. Because the reality, Sal, is policing is not black and white. The next time someone throws a bomb, it might go in a different direction. It might bounce somewhere else. It might hit someone else first. You can't predict these things frame by frame because they almost never unfold the way they do the first time around.
And listen, the clown came to town and the circus arrived with him with his goat and all this other stuff. So, but and it's a major thing that happened over the weekend, and it kind of took the air out of the balloon with everything else, especially with this homeless shelter thing, which is a very important issue because Staten Island will be dealing with it. So I was happy to highlight this for everyone. So at least you know what's going on, that they're still shoving shelters down your throat and expect you to pay for it, especially in Staten Island. That's coming from Mayor Mamdani, and we'll see what he does. I mean, Frank has pretty good dialogue. He gets along with everyone, and he's going to try his best with that whole issue. I did want to give a sad note here. I believe is a police officer in 79 Precinct that passed away, right? Yes. There it is. NYPD guys in Kuwait after the whole incident with Iran. I have his name there? Police officer Sawfly Davies from the 79th precinct. Unfortunately, he passed away. So, I give my heartfelt condolences, and, you have to pray. This is what I'm saying. The Americans all abroad have to be worried because, people perishing in this thing, and it's all fine and dandy. It's only 6, 7 people, but when this becomes a much higher total as time goes on, you're going to start to say, what are we really doing this for? And I know that's what I'm saying. Now you have one police officer who's a major, by the way, that's no longer with us because of this war, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it's a war, it's a conflict, whatever you want to call it. He's a major, by the way.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. And it's important to note here that the death is tragic. It's terrible. And he unfortunately died because of a medical episode. So he wasn't involved in an airstrike or anything like that. But you just wonder anytime something like this happens. So I'm going to relate it to a football player. When a football player dies because of a medical episode and they're in their 30s or their 40s, the first thing you think about is, was that because they played football? Did they have head injuries or something like that? Medical conditions because of an injury to their body, anything like that caused a brain aneurysm, something else. With this guy, I mean, I'm questioning how being a police officer, but also serving in the military kind of took a toll on him, because it's a lot to have to be deployed overseas and to constantly be living with the fear that you could be going to war. And then you're also on the street apprehending perps, getting guns, going on radio runs where people are their EDP. So he was doing 2 very stressful jobs, and it's very tragic and sad that he died overseas fighting for this country, but not in the heat of battle or anything like that, just due to a medical episode.
Yeah, it's very sad, but still, it's caused by what? The conflict. He wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for the conflict. So, that's one of the sad things. And I want to highlight things when you see a police officer. Something happened.
You need to, and that's why we're making a valiant effort to do so. And he was someone who had a great career with the department. Started with the 79th precinct, was at the military extended leave desk as well, and someone who, by all indications, really gave it all to policing, protecting people on the streets in New York City, and then also protecting the country overseas. So you have to give him double credit for that as well.
Yeah. So I just want to point that out. I think you have something else, right? It was news.
Yeah, one more thing
very important
before we take a bow and exit stage right for the day. So amidst all of the conflict going on in the Middle East right now, both of Trump's sons, Eric and Don Jr., they started a new drone company, and they're now looking to expand said company overseas. And Eric Trump actually a couple hours ago chimed in on the matter, saying, I happen to believe drones will be a much better investment than companies that still print newspapers. He was calling out the Wall Street Journal, because the Wall Street Journal, in this article, you guys can all take a minute to read it as well when you get an opportunity. It points out that as other drone companies' stock prices are going down, the cost and the price of this drone company is going up. And they're also doing business in the Ukraine, other areas overseas. And it's very sketchy because it looks like a conflict of interest, right? Because the president of the United States runs the U.S., and then the U.S. is going to be buying drones from his son's company because of what? And they had never bought drones from these people before either. So it looks and smells bad at a time when Americans are seeing gas prices surge to $5 a gallon in some areas. And I know the economy is doing decently. Frank touched on that. But, the bottom line is the cost of living is still stagnating and is very high for a lot of people. And the Trump family seems like they're patting their own pockets.
Yeah, the drone thing is no good. We highlighted how he also is the lead investor of the drone company that's also in that war. They're an Israeli company. I believe now are they shifting over to Iran, because then there'll be a lot of money being made. So a huge conflict of interest, huge. I mean, right here, Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., president's sons, are backing a new drone company that is vying to meet fresh demand from the Pentagon and fill a hole left by the administration's ban on new Chinese drones in the U.S. Isn't that interesting? I find this all odd. Just a week before, 10 days prior to this whole Iran conflict, they invest in a drone company that's now being used by the Pentagon. And that was before. Now this is the second one. Doesn't look good. You know, it
And
looks
when you look at the website, not that the website of a company always indicates how they operate, but it looks kind of vanilla, right? Like there's not a whole lot of examples of where the drones are being used. It almost looks like, Sal, something you made as part of a college class project, right? Because your professor was requiring you to make a website. It doesn't really look sophisticated. There's no specificity about where these drones are being used, only that they're manufactured in the US and designed for high risk environments. So like it's odd that we were buying drones from China and now we're going to switch to a startup company that has unproven technology, not to mention the safety risk involved, because if we're using new drones that are unproven, think about the blind spots that they're going to miss. Think about things that they could not pick up on their radar. I mean, we're using very unregulated vanilla technology that not a lot of people know about to carry out these massive important projects, and somehow it doesn't look right, especially when you consider that the president's son is involved with this company. And it's a startup too. Like, would you use a startup to build your apartment building or to do something crazy like that, or to build the car that you're going to be driving around as your daily driver every single day when you've been driving a nice Honda or Toyota? I mean, come on. It looks and sounds ridiculous.
I want to point people to the right direction. I could sit here and throw pom-poms. Trump's doing great, but, you know, then you look at his sons going, what the hell is that? I mean, it's not what your father could let you know what's going on. I mean, this is corruption. That's what this sounds like to me and to many others, whether people want to admit it or not. And it should be addressed at a certain point. Like, how is that even allowed? And look, you can make this all day long. You say, talk about Biden and Bill Clinton and this one. I'm telling you right now, right in front of you, right here, right now. We could always argue about the past things that happened, but right now we're in a conflict, and his sons just so happen to be investing in companies that have drones. And all of a sudden there's this whole uptick with Iran where they're going to be throwing drones. They're going to be firing drones. It's coming out of Israel, which is where the company is. Very, very bizarre. I mean, what can I say? Well, it's a strange coincidence, Jack. It's a strange coincidence.
What type of handshake agreement did he and Netanyahu have when all of this started? Like, I'm going to help you in your war, but you have to rub my son's backs as well. That's what this looks like to me. It's because we mysteriously end our drone contract with China, a country that we have a proven relationship with for technological advancements. And now we're going to start using the Trump drones. And by the way, we're going to be flying them in Israel, and they trust us in Israel too. All of this is executed in conjunction with one another, and it just looks extra suspicious for all of those reasons.
Yeah. Samantha Guccione says spot on, Jack.
It's true. And I think people are getting tired of hearing about, oh, we have the Trump drones, we have new Trump real estate, we have a new ballroom that's being built in the White House. Oh, and by the way, Kai Trump, I don't know if you saw this, but Kai Trump puts out a video where she's traveling all over the country, and she's like, oh, I brought the Secret Service with me. We're paying for the Secret Service as well. And we need the Secret Service in Washington and also overseas because, by the way, we're fighting a war. And Kai Trump is also of the age where she could be entering into a military draft that Trump floated over the weekend, but she isn't too. So there's a lot of angles where this just looks and reeks of extreme nepotism.
That's right. And that's the best way to describe it. So I guess with that being said, if you guys can, you go to salgreco.com. We're revamping that as we speak. It's just taking a lot behind the scenes. If you feel inclined to help us, you click the support button. Anything you could send our way, it helps this show and the whole platform grow as a whole. Thanks everybody that follows us. And if you do follow us, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, on YouTube, and Rumble on the @the Sal Greco Show. That's the handle, @the Sal Greco Show. Follow us on there. Also, like our stuff, share it out. If you want to watch the show, again, we're on Rumble and YouTube, The Sal Greco Show. Don't forget to hit the notification bells on that. Also, on Instagram, The Sal Greco. You can follow Jack, J_Stern97, both on X and Instagram, and also on X @the Sal Greco. I think that about wraps it up. I'd like to thank, once again, Frank Morano, the city councilman in New York City for the 51st district, which is the southern part of Staten Island. I think you heard a lot here. You could always go back and listen to it again. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for being here again. IACRL.org is your last chance to get ready for the dinner that's on the 11th, 2 days from now. Sign up, become a member, and then get your ticket to go to that event. And of course, salgreco.com/support. If Jack, I have nothing else to say, we're going to sign off from South Florida, which, as you know, is a sunny place for shady people.
What I'm asking New Yorkers for is to look back at all the things I've done as a deputy commissioner for operations, the assistant as assistant commissioner, and my time as a not only as a New Yorker but as a police officer. I get stuff done.
Listen, there was a book that came out that Jasmine Ray wrote, and in the Daily News today, it stated that there was a sexual action that happened in Borough Hall. She reported in that book, and it wasn't. You're a dark, sick person, man. You know that? You're a dark, sick person. Your name was on the byline. And there's some of you that have been covering me. You guys could part. Let me do this. Y'all could depart. Y'all could depart. Some of you have been covering me for 3.5 years. Some of you are so sick and dark, and you're the leader of that. You're one of the most dark writers that I've ever seen in this city. And your personal sick vendetta and the sickness of how you think of over-sexualizing a black man, that in the book it stated that there was a sexual action in Borough Hall. That was never in the book. But that's typical of the sickness and the darkness of your sick mind. You're one of the sickest reporters I know. Go to the next question. You're a sick person.